pleasant good morning, students. Today in Science Corner, we are going to be looking at animal body coverings. Say it with me, animal body coverings. And I am your teacher for today. My name is Mrs. Clarinet Durant, and I hope that you enjoy today's lesson. By the end of today's lesson, you should be able to name some animals in your environment, identify at least 2 animal body coverings, group animals according to their body coverings. Do you think you can do that? Yes, I do think you can. So now, I would like for you to use your eyes, and we're going to look. You're going to look at your arms and your legs. You're going to observe, pay close attention. So take a look at your arms, take a look at your legs, maybe mommy's legs or your cousin's legs, whoever is there with you. Take a look at them, observe it. What do you think your body is covered in? I am hearing some people saying hair, okay. Some people are saying skin, and you are both correct. So our entire body is covered in skin, and on top of that skin we have hair. Excellent job. Now we're going to use our eyes again, and we're going to look at the animals around us. What animals can you find around you? Maybe you have a dog, maybe it's a cat, or maybe you even have a goldfish. So take a look at the animal, observe it. Can you guess what its body is covered in? Let's find out. Do you think animals are covered in hair too? Well, in today's lesson, we're going to explore that. And actually, animals are covered in 4 main body coverings. So here on this slide, you can get a clue of the 4 main body coverings that we're going to look at. So the first body covering is, can you guess? The first body covering we're going to look at is fur or hair. So look at that fur. How do you think it feels? Does it look soft? Does it look crunchy? Do you think it's hard? Okay. So we're going to explore now some animals that are covered in fur. Do you have any idea, any clue of some animals that may be covered in fur? Let's see if your guesses are correct. So the first animal that we're going to be looking at is a meow, is a cat. So let's look at the cat. Look at the cat's body. The entire body is covered in fur. Doesn't the cat look fluffy? Look at the color of its fur. What colors do you see? Am I hearing white? Some people are saying orange. Others are saying brown. You're all correct. The cat is covered in fur. Can you think of any other animals that may be covered in fur? I have one in mind. It goes woof woof. What animal do you think that is? That is a dog. Let's look at the fur on the dog. What color is its fur? I see some blacks and some browns. Look at its fur. Does it look the same as the cat's? No, but it's still called fur. So cats and dogs are covered in fur. Can you think of any other animals that are covered in fur? Did somebody say a goat? Yes, that is correct. I'm hearing someone saying a donkey. Yes, that is correct too. And what about what did you say? The sheep? Yes, the sheep is also covered in fur. So far we have looked at 1 animal body covering, and that is fur. Hair is used for animals. Hair is used for people. We use the word hair when we're talking about the body covering of people, and when we're referring to animals, we will call them fur. So let's go on to the second body covering. Can you guess what it is? It is feathers. Some animals are covered in feathers. And here today I have with me some feathers. Do you see them? Have you ever seen feathers before? Where do feathers usually come from? Well, we're going to explore some animals today that are covered in feathers. The first animal is a chicken. Look at all of those chickens. Look at their feathers. Do you notice the colors on their feathers? What colors do you see? Some are gray, some are white, some have black. And the chicken's feathers very colorful. Did you realize that chickens had so many colored feathers? Wow. Chickens are covered in feathers. And you students are doing an excellent job so far at naming the colors and naming the body coverings. Let's move on to the next animal. So here we have a pigeon. Some of you may say a ground dove, and you are correct too. So what is the pigeon covered in? The pigeon is covered in feathers. Do you see the colors on the pigeon? What colors do you see? Some of them were white, some of them brown. So just like chickens, pigeons are covered in different colored feathers too. So both of these animals are covered in feathers. Can you think of any other animal that is covered in feathers? Did somebody say a duck? You're right. Did another person say a chicken hawk? Yes, that is correct too. Those animals are covered in feathers. And that was our second animal body covering. Let's move to the third. Some animals are covered in shell. Have you seen a shell before? How did the shell feel? How did it look? Was it hard? Was it smooth? Was it rough? Think about this. Now here today, I have with me my friend Shelly. And Shelly is covered in a, can you guess? Shelly is covered in a shell. Look at Shelly's shell. Isn't it a big shell? How do you think it feels? Right here, it's smooth, and these other areas are rough, and it's very hard. Can you hear that? Shelly's shell is very hard. Have you ever seen an animal like Shelly before? Do you know its name? Did somebody say land turtle? In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we call this animal the land turtle, but its correct name is the tortoise. Could you say that with me? Say tortoise. So you can call it a land turtle or a tortoise. Look at the patterns on Shelly's shell. Isn't his shell very cool? It's quite fascinating. Now let's move on to our next animal that is covered in a shell. Can you guess what animal it is? Did you say crab? So here today we are looking at a crab. And this crab, we would call it a soldier crab. But its correct name is a hermit crab. And the hermit crab wears a shell. And that one lives on land. But what about the crabs that live in the water? Are they covered in shell too? Look at this crab creeping across there. It is covered in shell. Actually, its entire body is covered in a hard shell. Can you think of any other animal that is covered in a shell? A snail. You are right. Wilks. That's correct too. So these animals can be covered in shell. So we looked at Shelly, who's a tortoise, is covered in shell. We looked at the crab that can be wearing a shell like Shelly or have its entire body covered in shell. What other animals do you think we're going to do next? What other body covering? The final one, the fourth body covering. Some animals are covered in scales. Look at those scales. Do you see the different patterns on them? Some are green, some look gray. How do you think the scales feel? Have you ever seen scales before? Have you ever touched scales before? Okay, interesting. So let's go to our first animal that is covered in scales. And it is none other than the fish. Look at this beautiful fish. The fish has many different colored scales. What colors do you see on the fish? This one has some yellow. It even had some dots, like it's wearing polka dots like my top. That's cool. Wow. And this is a school of fish. And look at this huge parrotfish. Look at the colors of its scales. Some are green, some look orange, others red. Wow. And is this Nemo? Do you think this is Nemo? No, it's not Nemo. Well, these fish are also covered in scales, and the fish's scales can be different colors. Now let's move on to our next animal. Our next animal is an iguana. An iguana is covered in hard scales. Look at this iguana. Isn't it a big iguana? And the scales on its body are very rough. Can you see them here in this shot? The scales are rough. Look at the scales on its head and on the side of its cheek. Those are huge scales. So an iguana is covered in scales. They may not look like the fish's scales, but they are still called scales. And now we have another animal that is covered in scales. So remember I showed you Shelly before? And what did I say about Shelly? Shelly is wearing Shelly is a little shy. Shelly is wearing a shell. But let's look at Shelly's legs right here. What do you think these are? They look like the iguana's scales. So Shelly is wearing a shell, and he also has scales on his legs. What color are the scales on Shelly? Some are red, some look orange, and others black. So Shelly is a cool animal. He is covered in 2 body coverings. Don't you find that fascinating? Can you think of any other animal that is covered in scales? Did somebody say a lizard? Yes, the green lizards outside are covered in scales. And I hear somebody jumping up and saying, Miss, a kokobay. And you are right, a kokobay is also covered in scales like that of the iguana. And that was our 4th body covering. So let's review the 4 body coverings that we have done so far. We looked at fur, we looked at feathers, then we looked at shell, and we also looked at scales, the 4 animal body coverings. And now you are going to help me do an activity. Are you ready? Are you ready for this? Let's go. So this activity, I have a table here for you. And with this table, you're going to help me put the animals under their correct headings. So I have fur and feathers. Fur and feathers. What is the first animal you see there with all those babies on its back? What animal do you think it is? Someone saying a rat. Another person saying a manicou. Yes, in St. Vincent we call this animal a manicou, but in other countries you may hear people calling it an opossum. So here it's a manicou, or you can call it an opossum. Where should it go? Fur or feathers? Fur or feathers? The manicou should go under fur. Help me drag and drop it under fur. Excellent job. Did you get that right? Wow. Somebody ate some bright breakfast this morning. You're mashing up the place with this lesson. Now let's go on to the next animal. This is a very colorful bird. It is actually the national bird of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and its name is the Amazona gildingi. Now where should we put the Amazona gildingi? Fur or feathers? Fur of feathers, we should put it under feathers. Let's drag and drop it under feathers. Great job, terrific. The next animal we have here is a great owl. You can hear them in the early mornings making their noise and going hoot hoot. And this owl, is it covered in fur or feathers? Fur or feathers? The owl is covered in feathers. Good job. Let's put the owl and the feathers together. Excellent. Now that final animal, that looks like a teddy bear, but I don't think it's a teddy bear. It's an actual bear. Now what do you think the bear is covered in? Fur or feathers? Fur or feathers? The bear is covered in fur. Excellent job. Let's put the bear under fur. So let us review our table that we have completed together. Thank you so much for your help, by the way. So on the fur, we have our manikou and our bear. And on the feathers, we have the Amazona gildingi, which is a parrot. And we have an owl. Excellent job, students. Now let's do one more table together. So in this table, we're going to be looking at animals that are covered in shell or scales. Shell or scales. So the first animal we're looking at, it has a striped something on its back. A striped what? Where do you think that goes? Shell or scales? Shell or scales? This snail, we should put it on the shell. Excellent. Let's put the snail on the shell. The snail is wearing a shell. The next animal, this green animal, it goes and it likes to slither. What is this animal? This is a snake. Now where should we put the snake? Shell or scales? Shell or scales? We should put the snake under scales. The snake is covered with scales. It would take us a very long time to count all of those scales on that snake. And now our next green animal, this is a tiny green lizard. Now what is the lizard covered in? The lizard is covered in shell or scales? Shell or scales? The lizard is covered in scales. So we put the lizard right next to the snake there. And now we have a final animal, and this animal lives under the sea. Under the sea. Now where should it go? Shell or scales? Shell or scales? We should put the sea turtle under shell. Some people are saying shell. Yes, I'm hearing it. Yes, we think we should put the sea turtle under shell. But now, let's take a closer look at the sea turtle's head and its flippers. What is it covered in? That looks to me like scales, like the scales that we saw on Shelly's legs. So therefore, the sea turtle is covered. You see the scales on Shelly's legs? It's almost the same thing. So the sea turtle should go on the scales too. So just like Shelly, the sea turtle is a cool creature that is covered in two body coverings. It has a shell and it has scales. Thank you so much for your help. Let's review our table. So on the shell, we have a snail and a sea turtle. And on the scales, we have a snake, a lizard, and a sea turtle. And now, this is the fun part. You are going to help me sing a song. So this song was written by my friend, and it will be sung to the tune, my friend Javon Fernandez, and it will be sung to the tune of Old MacDonald. The song is entitled On My Farm. On My Farm. So let's go. I have the words on the screen for you to sing along with me. 1, 2, 3. On my farm I have a dog covered in some fur, a cat, a rabbit, a goat, and a cow, all covered up with fur, with a fur here, fur there, here a fur, there a fur, everywhere a fur. On my farm I have a dog covered in some fur. On my farm I have some fish covered in some scales, a snake, a lizard, and an alligator, all covered up with scales, with some scale here, scale there, here some scales, there some scales, everywhere some scales. On my farm I have some fish covered in some scales. On my farm I have a crab covered in a shell. My snails, turtles, and lobsters too are covered with a shell, with a shell here, a shell there, here a shell, there a shell, everywhere a shell. On my farm I have a crab covered in a shell. Then on my farm I have some hens covered in feathers. My ducks, parrots, and pigeons too, covered in feathers, with a feather there, some feathers here a feather, there a feather, everywhere a feather. On my farm I have some hens covered in feathers. On my farm I have many animals with feathers, scale, fur, and shells, and I love them all the same. Do you love them all the same? So today's lesson we looked at animal body coverings, and let us review the ones that we looked at. We looked at, let me hold this up for you, we looked at feathers. These are actually pigeon feathers. We looked at this animal right here. We looked at shell. We looked at scales, and we looked at fur. Did you enjoy today's lesson? Are you saying yes? Thank you so much. That really warms my heart. So I hope to see you next time in Science Corner with me, Mrs. Kleine Durant, and enjoy the balance of
on Sonora Freeway.
Need some backup, please! Thanks so much.
Ambulance, backup required on Sonora Freeway.
Do you know its name? Did somebody say land turtle? In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we call this